The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have another fantastic guest for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and also Light Fair. May 4th through 8th, we will see you guys there.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got a lot of information, including all of our episodes, but also information about the new certification by NAILD, the Lighting Specialist in Controls. If you want to get started with understanding lighting controls from different perspectives, it's definitely worth checking out and considering going this June at Lightovation. But also, huge shout out to our sponsors, which we could not do this show without. Today's sponsor is the Dolly Alliance. You should check them out at dali-alliance.org. And they are just a fantastic resource. We're seeing a huge resurgence in Dolly in North America. And hopefully we're going to actually see some traction with this because they have some excellent resources this time. Dolly 2 standard is much more robust than the original Dolly. If you have bad impressions of how Dolly used to be, you should absolutely check out their website, check out their resources. We have had a great couple of conversations actually with Dolly representatives and people with the Dolly Alliance, including the Dolly Lama, if you know him. And also, they have other standards, including D4I and Dolly Plus. If you're unfamiliar with those terms, definitely check out the episodes we've done, but also check out their website. Again, that's dali-alliance.org. But let's get into the conversation. So today we have Chase. Chase, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Of course, yeah. My name is Chase Rowe. I am a design engineer at TSP Smart Spaces. I've been in the company for quite some time, probably working on close to almost 15 years now. My progression there has really can be aligned with the company because it started as a managed service provider, which is somewhat of an IT company that other companies will outsource to, and we really developed into getting into home automation, and then of course from home automation you work yourself into lighting control because that's kind of where it all starts. So I would say around 2016, 17 was probably the first time I really put my hands on lighting control as a service. It was Lutron ecosystem. So that was basically diving right into the deep end with that. There were no radio frequency dimmers involved with that project. That was low voltage keypads and individually addressable lights, which was a great way to start. So and now I'm here. So.
Well, welcome to the show. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's useful to mention here is that TSP does a lot of residential projects rather than just, you do still get involved in the commercial project every now and then. But from the perspective of a commercial group, you would be what's referred to as a dealer in the residential market. Would that be an accurate way of representing the group?
Yeah, dealer, integrator, and when it does come to commercial, we will, primarily deal with the AV. We do conference rooms. Yep. The lighting control, obviously that's its own beast in the commercial world that we haven't tapped into. But our bread and butter is luxury residential is what we do best.
Yeah, and I think that's such a unique aspect that we don't get a lot of people who understand the residential world of lighting controls on this show because commercial tends to be much more heavily focused from the larger scale of projects. Although high-end residential can be quite expensive and quite profitable.
I think there's something to be said that I would almost say that high-end residential is commercial lighting. I think that's where it's come from now
Well,
as far
and
as the size of some of these homes.
well,
Yeah.
if you don't
Yeah.
mind diving a little bit into that
Yeah.
description, because I think you're right. But what makes you say that?
I it's what we look for. Like, the clients that we have are great. A lot of them come in, they know what they want, and a lot of
Mhm.
them don't. And a some are used to a certain standard, and the famous phrase that comes always into play is, I want to hit one button and all my lights turn off when I leave. So that's just like the like, okay, well, we can start
Yeah.
this conversation of you know where lighting control goes from there. And it's typically what comes with high-end residential, what comes
Mhm.
with the people wanting to have that one button that turns off everything. Also comes that luxury mindset of, I want low voltage keypads
Right.
because um, they take up minimal wall space, and
Mhm.
my interior designer says they look very nice as well. And so you get into these projects that are very large scale. You know, we only deal primarily with Lutron Homeworks, and that's
Hmm.
their top level of scalability. What you need
Right.
in some of these projects, we have projects that 6 stories in Boston Back Bay, that you cannot handle anything below Homeworks. And so
Hmm.
um, that's
And
what needs to get specified, and where we go from there as far as fixtures is a whole nother ball game.
sure. Well, and I think it's interesting because Lutron has such a different functionality in the residential world than it does in the commercial world. And
Oh yeah.
so, what specifically about Homeworks makes it much more dynamic and flexible for these kinds of projects?
I mean, primarily that is the flexibility really goes into the programming of it all. And
Hmm.
while Homeworks does have a large line of luxury keypads, um, they created their own ecosystem where you have your
Hmm.
automatic window treatments, you have your keypads, you have fixtures as well. As they introduced Ketra a few
Hmm.
years ago. Um, on the back end of it is the programming and the software itself, which
Hmm.
allows a huge amount of flexibility for the client themselves and whatever lifestyle they have. And that could be anything from, well, this is my third house and I'm only here for 3 months, 4 months. What is my house doing when
Yeah.
I'm not here? It's like, well, we
Right.
could tell you, just make sure you hit the vacation button on your way out. But
Right.
it's it's having that you know automatic feedback, that dynamic lighting,
Hmm.
while they're there and while they're not there. And
Yeah.
I think another thing about that is like what the overall experience is that they have when they walk into a room.
Right.
Maybe they don't want to hit a button when they walk into the room. We have occupancy sensors, and maybe that
Hmm.
occupancy sensor has you know, a different, we could
Detection
say,
range or something.
detection range, or there's it's 11 p.m. That
Oh,
occupancy
yeah.
sensor knows
Conditional
not to, conditional,
programming. Yep.
thank you,
Yeah.
to not go on at
Right.
50%, but let's hit 20%, so we're not you know giving you a seizure out of bed. But
Yeah. I mean, and so like, it's fair to say that high-end residential is demanding, right? And it's not necessarily the clients. The physical projects are demanding because you're in someone's home. This isn't their office. How they expect the lights to react and operate in their house is a vastly different way than they expect to interact with them in their office, right? And I'm sure you guys get into a lot of color tuning, color changing, as well as white light and shifting between the two, which is, usually in commercial projects they're separated to some extent, right? The color changing might be on the walls or whatever. So can you talk a little bit about how you deal with some of that demand and try to find a balance and keep the client happy while also really meeting the needs of the project?
Yeah, I mean, there's listening is the most important part. Everyone is different. I've never met one person with a same opinion on lighting, and lighting is so subjective. Um,
Right.
and it's really listening to the client and being able to deliver on those expectations. Sometimes you do need to set expectations, and what they're asking is, I've been on the fence of being like, no, you're wrong, you don't want that, but I tend to kind of soften the blow a little bit. But there is a, like, whatever, what product fits the solution, the expectation of the client. Sometimes you get somebody who knows exactly what they want. um, the I keep on coming back to Lucian because that's just what I'm familiar with. And there's the ability to have different control, whether it is human centric lighting, the ability
Mhm.
to have party. It is not that difficult anymore. And there's
Yeah.
there's really great product out there that is getting into the luxury market, that's
Mhm.
allowing people to, I want to say, experiment more, and being able to, there could be a young couple that we love, we used to go out on the weekends every night to this club, and we want to experience that club here because we don't do that anymore. We live on the other side of the country, and there could be little stories like that that kind of
Mhm.
inspire uh, the approach that you take and the products that you use, and still have it a viable, like, no, it's not like that all the time. During the
Right.
day, we have tunable white, but by a touch of a button, you can obviously create that experience that you personally have. So
Well, and I
it's
think that
certainly
that's
easier to balance that out now. Yeah.
Mm,
for sure, and that is something that is uniquely different about the residential world compared to the
yes.
commercial world. Commercial world, you're lucky enough to get a moment's time with the owner to talk about the lighting control needs. With the residential world, you really do get that opportunity because this is an intimate interaction that they're going to have day in, day out. And so I would say that dealer integrators in the residential world are much more attuned to lighting controls capabilities and functionalities, even if they're focused on the residential style of equipment. But I think to your point with the homeworks comment, you know, it is very much more commercial in that regard. Doing a callback to the conversation we just had with Sam last week, he was talking about how DMX allows for a precision that you don't get in other protocols sometimes. And so, that kind of precision might be necessary in a residential application. And so you'll still need DMX at times. But with Dolly and with other kinds of digital protocols being introduced, you have the ability to really dial into things um, much more precisely than you used to, because in the residential world, phase dimming is the most popular protocol for controlling a luminaire, as opposed to 0 to 10, which is the most popular in commercial, at least out here in North America. In Europe, it's mostly Dolly. So, but from that standpoint, are you seeing movement towards adopting digital dimming protocols as opposed to sticking with phase dimming?
Yeah, like, it's so from my comment that I said my first project was using Lutron ecosystem. What is
Right.
that? Like, let's just say it's similar to Dolly, right? It's the
Yeah.
individual addressable lighting, digital communication. Every light has constant voltage, and it's getting a communication, dim to this amount, shut off, turn
Hmm.
on. I am seeing a, which has been great, um people are getting educated, whether, let's not Educated is a strong word. People are becoming aware of
Yes.
That was a good choice.
aware of the flexibility of lighting control, and by that I mean individual adjustable lights, and not having the constraint of a switch leg, right? Not having that, here's my dimmer that just does these 4 lights. So certainly people are becoming aware, and I think the popularity of tunable white is introducing dolly and 0 to 10 volt a lot more in residential. I have very strong opinions on this because someone who is, I don't know, specify I don't see the specifying 0 to 10 volt, and I don't know if there's something else to it, but specifying 0 to 10 volt for tunable white just seems very counterintuitive. Just coming from where I learned in my school of lighting is, keypads and addressable lights, where dolly for tunable white, you're not taking up space. So whereas 0 to 10 volt, you have multiple points of control that you have to maintain, whereas dolly, specifically DT8, you have one address for a light that does both tuning and intensity. And I just think that is just a perfect thing. And it goes back to one location.
Well,
so
and also on top of that, with 0 to 10 volt 2 channel control, you have a much higher, much more difficult time trying to maintain hue while reducing or increasing intensity.
Okay. See, I didn't know that. Thank you. But so that's just more of being
it's
like,
another
0
argument.
to 10 volt.
Yeah.
But I mean, so we do have these technologies that are, helping introduce dolly. Of course, you could just get dolly that just dims lights. You could do that. But I think the awareness of people and human-centric lighting, the tunability that you get now with a lot of fixtures, it's putting, dolly and, digital link from Lutron in front of people now. And they're just being like, oh, this is actually pretty fascinating. And that's giving a lot more opportunities for that education to come in. I'm doing a project right now that includes dolly, DMX, and phase dimming. And it's a very interesting space. The client they know what they want. They had an idea of what they want. And now it is, we're having fun, calibrating, let's call it tuning the home. And the education comes in where it's like, they wanted one thing, there was a constraint on the fixture, so we had to go with this other direction. And then dolly was specified for tunability. With Lutron and dolly, what we are able to do is create a human-centric system, makeshift almost, where addressing the tunability does not address the intensity. So what we can do is basically create schedules for those lights to be changing behind the scenes throughout the day. So when she turns on at 9 a.m., there's going to be a little bit more, or earlier than that, a little bit more warmth to that light. When she turns the lights on around 1 p.m., that those lights might be a little bit more energetic. They might be closer to 3,500 Kelvin. That's high, but
for residential, for sure.
For residential. But this home has windows on all sides. There's the natural light coming in is beautiful. When those lights come on, it's perfect. So there's I mean, a lot that can be done, and it's been really fascinating to be able to use different technologies. And I've been it had the opportunity to do that, and it's just been great because I'm like a sponge, and I just, everything I can get my hands on.
Hmm.
I try to push it the next day. Like, no, you want this now. But no, it's been real fascinating watching Dolly,
Yeah.
become a little bit more popular. I'll
That's
help
awesome.
it.
I think
I'm more than
I
happy
think
to
it's
help it. Come on.
it's great. I mean, it's great to hear, and especially to see it now, obviously outside of just the commercial environment, right? That it's
Hmm.
being adopted in residential, and it does make sense in a lot of regards, especially as homes move away from just line voltage dimming, phase dimming. Um, so you mentioned working with DMX. We have a lot of conversations with people who seem to be afraid a little bit of DMX and the complexities of those systems. Can you speak a little bit about how you're dealing with multiple protocols like DALI and DMX on the same project, and how you're handling that from a control standpoint? Are you using one control front end? Are you using multiple systems and marrying them together? How are you handling that?
I'm one of those scared people. Uh,
Love
it
it.
can be, it's the journey to get to the end is certainly a long journey, when you have so many different protocols in one project, because it's how do you
Yep.
bring it all together. And I it's it would make sense to use, let's you get the DMX is specified at a project. You send out a packet to your lighting rep, and they come back, and here's this wall piece that has a rainbow wheel on it, and here's your DMX controller. It's like, I mean, this is actually perfect. This is awesome. I'm sure this controls the lights exactly the way we want to control them, but we can't use this. We can't put this on the wall. So I've had fun, certainly, learning how to control DMX. The, every control system, whole home control system, and Lutron have their own DMX controllers
Mhm.
that we can tie in, and it's just a matter of tweaking. The precision thing that you mentioned earlier, makes sense when you're dealing with DMX. I find it's tough when you're forcing something to be in, maybe it's not its natural habitat, as far
Yeah.
as the lighting control system goes. And when you're working with like an RGBW DMX, it's not easy,
Hmm.
to get it right. And it on the manual side of it, let's say on the user, you know, side that they see on their app, it's a bunch of sliders that, you can
Right.
manipulate
Yep.
each color. That's all fun, but the idea is to, like, let's not let's let them know that it's there, but what can we do to make it so they don't have to, so they can just hit a button,
Right. Right.
after conversations, and get it to work with this one button, and that's it, call it a day. um the grandkids love the sliders, so that's great, that's
Yeah.
there for them. But you don't need to spend your time with these sliders, and we're going to make it perfect
Yep.
for you. So there is a lot of calibration that's involved with it. But on the
Well,
back
and
end, it looks like a mess, but
right.
they don't need to know
Well,
that.
and that agrees with the conversation we just had with Sam, and
Yep.
it's so funny how these episodes sometimes just dovetail perfectly. But DMX takes time. It takes time to program. It takes time to calibrate. And again, to your point, the controller itself is a limiting factor. If you just end up with this tiny little device on the wall, that may be completely insufficient for what you're trying to do. And so as a result, but what's interesting here for me anyways is that Sam's focus from the commercial side is very much on functionality. And while you're still talking about functionality, the other big piece here is, what is the user interface? Because in residential, user interface in a lot of cases is what sells the project.
Yep.
The functionality could be as limited as possible, But if the faceplate is gorgeous and it's engraved and it's got brass, finish to it, it's like, no, that's what I want. And so as a result, you're kind of shackled to that element. And so what is it like having those conversations with homeowners about the user interfaces?
Expectations, expectations, expectations. We have we're in a position where it's like, okay, we're not glued to one application. There's a million different services that are going on in
Mhm.
residential, especially high end luxury residential, and we have control systems as well, and these sometimes can get you know they get laid right on top of the lighting control system. And these
Mhm.
systems may be, Savant, Josh AI, Crestron, whom if there's um, if a client comes in with a specific, say, I have Savant in my other house, I want it in this house. Okay, fine, that's great.
Yeah.
Uh, it's then there's very little explaining to do of what things are going to look like for that client.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hand holding. There's a lot of education that has to happen when we do have you know these different interfaces that the user has to interact with. So
Right.
we have a showroom. Thank God we have a showroom that we can have clients come into and see these different things. And it takes away half the explanation. Like, come, just see it for
Right.
yourself. Come on, come on. And it's great because we have all the keypads, all the interfaces, iPads, things like that. They can touch, they can mess around with stuff, which is great. But there are some limitations to if an AV video, dedicated AV room, a theater is an easy way to get a control system into a home that
Mhm.
may not necessarily need it. Where let's say we have a smaller apartment in the Boston area that's, oh, I have one TV, I don't need a control system, but they have an awesome lighting control system. It's just like, okay, so you have let's say tunable recessed lights, you have DMX. This is what those things are going to look like. Like, we can set the app and we can customize it all we want to, what buttons they see and the way that they'll interact with it. And inevitably they'll explore and find out more things on their own and come back to us. But there's certainly expectations that need to be
Mm.
set and limitations because of, let's say,
Mhm.
back for the example of the 0 to 10 volt tunable lights. Those just show up as two dimmers, let's say,
Yeah.
in Lutron, for example. And it's just like, they're
Right.
labeled, you know, intensity, they're labeled, but it's two dimmers for one load, essentially. And
Yeah.
it's a lot that happens after that. If you're sitting in a living room with layers upon layers of lighting, there's no chance that you're looking at that app and being like, looking for those niche lights, found it. It's just
Yeah.
really setting the expectations, listening to the client, getting their priorities on the wall first.
Mhm.
Don't depend on
Mhm.
the user interface. Get them on the wall first, what they want
Mhm.
to have control of, prioritize that. And then that app is kind of like, yeah, if you really want to mess around and go good into it, here's this.
Well, and I think that this is one of the things I really find fascinating about the residential world is that you basically, dealers, integrators have been doing this for years now, and they have come to the same realization that the commercial world is starting to come to, which is you need to confirm expectations on the
Mhm.
system before you design the system. And so that is like, we're trying so hard to push getting a control intent narrative developed early on in the project phasing. And it's so hard because we don't have that ability to talk with the owners in a lot of cases. And so, whereas you get that face to face interaction because the scale of how many people are involved is so small
Yeah.
that you have that ability to ask those questions. But it's still critical to the success of the lighting controls project. I mean, have you ever done a project where you didn't have the ability to talk to the owner and get confirmation on these things?
Yes, Webster. I have a few right now. It's definitely as business has grown. I mean,
Yes.
we used to have like client facing. We are separate from the general contractor. Awesome relationship, great. We do have projects, that we are only talking to the general contractor, and
Mm,
sometimes we have zero communication with the client, and we're being told by a third party of what they
yeah.
want. Um, and so, I mean, it is tough. I think what we have, you know. I don't want to say we're reinventing the wheel, but we're learning very quickly, and we're able to pivot very fast on these new
Mhm.
types of clients that we're getting in as some of these residential projects are starting to seem like commercial projects because there's so many people involved.
Yeah.
Having that documentation and being like, this is the specification, but here is what we find helpful for our clients as well. This is documentation that TSP has created. This is, we might have a nice little schematic design packet that kind of goes through the space that can get handed off to this client, and we'll pass off
Mhm.
questions. But I mean, there certainly is a barrier, but all that you can do is, have your weeklies. Don't
Mhm.
cross off that question that you didn't get answered. Keep asking, and you know, set the expectations and make sure um, you just raise your concerns and
Mhm.
just like this is it. I don't know.
So you mentioned something that is interesting and unique, really unique to sort of the residential market that we really only see otherwise, I think, in the theatrical world, is that after you've done your installation and you've gone through training, your customer plays around and then they come back to you, right? That is not something that we see in the commercial market. We don't tell people to play around with it and do, here's the buttons on the wall, here how it works, and very rarely do you go back and make changes. Whereas in the theatrical world, I finish and I hand them a file and say, here's your backup. Now I want you to try and break it, and I'm going to come back in a month, and I want you to have a list of questions that we can go through, and we'll make any changes that you want. So in the residential world, obviously, people are going to play around. It's their homes. So how do you plan on those ahead of time? Do you tell your customers up front, I know you're going to call us back in a month, 2 months, and you plan on that? Or do you kind of wait for them? How do you handle that?
We absolutely put that the very beginning, that you have to live with your system, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to live with it because, especially if it's a new construction, you've never lived there before, you don't know how you're going to use the
Yep.
space, and we've listened to you. We know that this is going to be your study and this is going to be your little area where you read, but we don't, 2 weeks in, you're just like, actually, I put a CD player over here, and now that's my gym. But it's being able to, like, expectations again, and
Mhm.
we you're gonna live with it. We're gonna be back, and we're gonna walk through. It's a hand holding experience, and I mean, it's part of the process, and I
Mhm.
don't think it will never not be. Like, you can try your best to get it perfect, and if you nail it, congratulations. Like, that's awesome. But we're certainly, I mean, that's a very rare thing, and there's always going to be that opportunity to hang out and say, how do you use the space? Let's go through it. And it could even be like, if it's a was a very lighting forward project, it could just be like, we have to come back in the evening, so let's
Mhm.
get out a bottle of wine, we'll walk around, and we'll tune your home to how you like it. So it's certainly something that we're very upfront about, and I think most clients, I haven't really met one that has said, "Why do you need to come back?" So I
Interesting.
think, yeah, that people that have been living with it certainly know that before they even,
Yeah.
sign off on
No,
the
because
proposal.
again, that is like the exact opposite of commercial. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not even why do you need to come back? It's why do you need to be here in the first place? And so,
Mhm.
it's such a different world, and it's so fascinating to me to hear like these stories, because it's like that's where we want to be with commercial, but we're not there by any means. And
You-
the question is, how do we get there?
I just feel like especially now in like the last, the boom of wellness, and I just feel
Hmm.
like that would be adopted a little bit more in commercial, like where lighting is higher up on the spec list of everything. That I just feel like there should be some shift sooner than later
Hmm.
on
Yeah.
commercials
Well, and
being more understanding.
here's another thing that I love about the residential world. So when you say lighting, you're referring to the control system. In the commercial world, when you say lighting, you're referring to the fixtures.
Are you asking me or are you telling me?
No, well, I mean, you could have been saying the lighting system, like you could have been referring to the fixtures, but the majority of dealer integrators that I have spoken to in the residential world, the conversation has basically gone, do you do lighting? Oh yeah, we do lighting. How long have you been doing lighting? Oh, like 15, 20 years. Like, oh, interesting. What fixture lines do you have? Oh, we don't do fixtures.
Mm.
What are you talking about? Oh, like Lutron. It's like, oh, you're talking about the controls. Because in the commercial world, it's the exact opposite. Like, controls are the first thought in the residential
Mm.
world. The fixtures are in a lot of cases, because they're purchased by the contractors, an afterthought. Whereas it's the opposite in the commercial world. The fixtures come first, and then the control system comes.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I agree with you. I
Okay,
only
please
because
disagree with
only
me.
because only because I find myself a lot of the times coming onto projects, could be specifically these ones where there's a general contractor, there is somebody else specifying, let's say the architect specifies what
Hmm.
fixture they want, electrician has their lighting rep. A lot of the times
Hmm.
when I'm coming in, I'm looking at what fixtures have been specified, and my
Sure.
control system is certainly based on that 0 to 10 volt stuff. But
You're absolutely right. I pile. So the way that I worded that did sound like, okay, lighting. It's a blank slate, and then the control system is built up, and then the light fixtures get layered on top of that. What I mean is the actual design process, because in a lot of
mhm.
cases, when the architect or engineer or even the contractor puts the layout of the light fixtures, it is not designed. It is just laid out. It's like,
It's
okay,
their
that
first
looks
pass.
architecturally attractive, but it's not
Right.
actually a design. And so the system is
Sure.
designed, and the lighting system may never, the fixtures may never actually be designed. They may just
Hmm.
be like, okay, four-can fan, which is a term that I learned in the residential world, which means you just put 4 recessed down lights and a fan in the middle of the room, and you're done.
Oh.
And it's ugly, and it's awful, and any lighting designer in the world would shudder at that. But that
Hmm.
is the reality of residential, is that the fixtures don't really get designed. The lighting control system gets designed. And so that's what I mean by the controls come first and the fixtures come after.
Hmm.
Because that's the mentality of the residential world.
In the commercial world, is there somebody doing all of that? Like, is there a lighting designer in the commercial world that is specifying, providing, designing, doing the control programming, all of it, or are there way too many people to please, and that cannot
Ron, do you
exist
want to answer
in
that
this world?
question?
It is, and so it's a loaded question. Most commercial projects, it is you have your lighting designer, very often a separate controls designer who may be the person doing the programming, may not be, maybe an independent. Oh no, he's not as independent anymore. But maybe someone like Webster, who's doing that through another company. So there's a lot of different channels. It's very rare in the commercial market when you find a space where there's one company doing everything. Normally, if you find something like that, it's a unique, like a boutique hotel, and it's a dealer integrator like us who's more sort of theatrically focused, and will we can touch all of that because it's a smaller project, but that is extremely rare.
Yeah. Normally, it's the person actually doing the design work, the pen to paper work, tends to be the sales reps, and that's not to say that other people don't have a responsibility with that documentation. They still review it and make sure that it meets the needs of the system, but that's the vast majority of people who create the design documentations, and those documents are handed over to the engineers, the architects, lighting designers, whoever. The lighting designers rarely do the lighting control system design.
Yeah, it seems to me, and I could be like, I don't want to step on anyone's toes and the lighting mafia comes after me, but it's just like,
I'll tell my colleagues at the lighting mafia to back off.
It just seems like the most intimate thing you could be doing with your client is all of that, and the solution can be affected by how many people are working on it. Communication gets dropped. There's a misinterpretation of something that's on paper and or in an email, and I just feel like that is such a clutch thing to have. If you're able to sit down with the client, you're able to present a design and present the control system that's going to control the fixtures that you have placed on this dimensional, RCP that you have, and then provide it for that client. That's going to be the best product you can give as far as lighting goes, because it's just, it's the one-stop shop. I hate that term, but it's like, how, if I was a client and be like, but you're doing that, and but you're doing that, so but you're not the same company. I could that. I've been a part of those projects, and it can get messy, and you end up if you had three arms and three hands, you'd be pointing at three different people when there's a problem. So it's just
and
I just
we're almost out of time here, and while I was gonna do a complete wrap up, I feel like you took 50% of my wrap up right there. So no, I love it when what I'm going to say comes out of my guests' mouths, because that means that I am at least somewhat in tune with what's going on out in the world. And additionally, hopefully our audience gets a chance to really understand and appreciate that I'm not just some nut screaming into the wind. There's actually there's something that I want to there's genuine there's a reality behind what I'm saying. And so, and again, I think residential really is such a unique environment that fosters this mentality that is so fascinating. And it's like I love witnessing what's going on there, because of the fact that it is the shadow world of the commercial world. Everything's upside down in the residential world from the commercial world. And so, but one of the things that I see about that is there's this army of people who know lighting control systems, at least from a residential standpoint. Okay, are you going to start doing, multimedia color changing facades with DMX tomorrow? No. But you understand lighting controls and you find that challenge interesting, and you want to provide a solution to your customers that meets their expectations. And the only way to do that is to confirm what their expectations are at the outset. And that is the thing that the lighting controls specialists in the commercial world are desperately trying to communicate to everybody else. We need to know what is expected of this system before we can provide anything. And in a lot of cases, lighting control systems in the commercial world are dumped into the laps of the owners without any context, any explanation, sometimes no training even. And
Yeah.
how are they expected at all to interact with that system in a positive way? Because to your point, lighting control systems are complex and intimate, and everybody's got a different expectation of what good lighting controls and lighting design is. And so as a result, you really need to make sure that you confirm all of that stuff. Something that if I get pulled onto a residential project, one of the things I first ask is, tell me what your most favorite room in your house is. Without any context. Like, don't talk about the lighting, don't talk about the controls. Just tell me what your favorite room is and tell me how you interact with that room. Because that can actually tell me so much more about what this person wants than me going, what control system do you want? And unfortunately, that's sort of the format that we follow in the commercial world. What system do you want? Rather than, tell me how you expect this building to function. Tell me about your multi-purpose spaces. How are you going to use those spaces? And those conversations rarely happen, which is sad, because that is where you get that important information. And so from your company standpoint, you absolutely need to have those conversations, because otherwise you're really stuck in a weird situation, like you're under the GC and you don't have any visibility to what the owner wants from the project, and you have to work through this telephone game to get that information, if you're going to get that information at all. So really fascinating stuff with this, because again, this is the stuff that Ron and I talk about so often, and it exists out there, which is lovely to hear. But did I miss anything? Is there
I think that's, I mean, I think you're on the money. And I like knowing that I'm in this shadow world where I thrive, beneath the commercial setting.
the upside down?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like it's certainly the way forward. Just making sure you have, commitment, making sure expectations are there. But again, to the point, it's the intimacy of lighting. It's the how subjective it is of everyone's opinions. You have to listen to everyone, for sure, or you're not going to be able to deliver and make a. It's more of getting the person and what they, giving them what they want or asked for, but there's a better feeling in knowing that you've created an experience for them, and that's a whole lot more satisfying to me than checking off a box being like, we did it. No, it's more or less the gratification of it all. Yeah.
And that's what it is. It is an experience, right? At the end of the day, every space is unique and should be an experience. Chase, thank you. That was a ton of fun. And I will say, like, that is, you hit it right off the head. For anyone who was listening, for any of the designers who were like, oh, it's residential conversation. The biggest thing you said right off the bat was that no two customers are alike. And I can't tell you how many times Webster and I beat the drum of stop, copy, and paste. Stop, copy, and paste. And you hit it right off the head. You can't. No two customers are alike. And it doesn't matter if it's residential or commercial. No two spaces are the same. The users, the owners are different. And customers are becoming more aware. Because whether you're talking high-end residential or just anybody's apartment, it is so much easier now to have some level of home automation, even if it just starts at the lighting. So the idea of getting the design team more in tune with the project does not end when it's signed off, that you need to plan on going back a month later or 2 months later to meet with the owner and that team and understand what's working, what isn't working, because that's going to allow commercial projects to have better adoption, a better success rate, and we'll stop hearing as many stories of, I don't know, that thing just doesn't work, so we just ripped it off the wall and stopped using it. Well, you stopped using it and ripped it off the wall because it wasn't programmed right, possibly, right? Well, but like, it could be fixed 9 times out of 10. So, everything in the residential world, if we just took that and applied a good chunk of it to commercial, we could solve so many problems. So thank you so much, man. That was a ton of fun. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of this conversation. I will close this out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and Light Fair. We are coming up at the beginning of May. See you guys there.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes, a lot of other information, including information about the NAILD Lighting Specialist in Controls certification. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't heard me talk about it by now. But please check it out. I always welcome feedback about it too, because we really want to provide a great resource for the industry. And huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode, the Dolly Alliance. We could not do this without your support. I can't say enough good things about the Dolly Alliance. They are really trying their best to provide an excellent resource for the North American market. They're already standardized in Europe and a lot of other places. There's a reason it exists. There's a reason it is popular. It's worth understanding that protocol for a reason, and one of the places that it's perfectly poised for is the residential marketplace, for the very specific reason of that intimate experience in lighting. So if you're only familiar with the original format of Dolly, check out the new standards, Dolly 2, Dolly Plus, D4i. All of that stuff is really important to understand because it's coming. A lot of that technology is already embedded in a lot of luminaires nowadays, not just residentially, commercially, and we're seeing it pop up everywhere nowadays. So check them out, dali-alliance.org. But thank you so much for joining us here today, and Chase, really appreciate this. This was so much fun.